Hi, and welcome to our first creative lunch. It's really nice to have you here with me. I'm Debbie Clement-Large. I'm from Why Follow the Herd. And as everyone joins, I'll just let you know that you are in listen-only mode. But please feel free to put anything you want, any questions that you have in the chat box, and I'll keep my eye out and try to answer anything. Now, we've got people from all over the world joining us today. We've got people from the States, we've got people from New Zealand and the UK. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. And if you're in another place at all, just say hello, put it in the chat box of where you are, and so we can say a big hello to you. And you know, it's really exciting to have so many people here from all over the place just wanting to rediscover their creativity. As we are all born creative, and for a lot of us, that's squeezed out of us during our education, particularly the latter part of our education. And that happens in work as well. You know, work tends to stifle that unless we're in a particularly creative sort of industry. And that really doesn't need to be the case. And I've been through this rediscovery process myself, so I know how you're feeling and I know where you're coming from. So to help me talk you through my creative journey, I've got some slides as well, which I'm going to share with you now. But let me just put those up onto the screen. There we go. So today is all about the start. It's looking about where we are now and knowing our story. So it would be really, really great if you could have a pen and paper handy, because we'll be using that later on. Okay, so what is creativity? Well, creativity could be about picking up a paintbrush and learning to paint. It could be about starting to write a novel. Oh, hi, Confidence from Plymouth. I've just seen you come up on the chat box. Hi, nice to meet you. But, you know, and if you want to do those types of creative stuff, that's fantastic and brilliant. And as Steve Jobs says, creativity is about connecting things. And that could be about connecting us to our authentic selves, so our real selves and who we are, but also it's about connecting us to other people as well. And when you find your creativity, it can help us to be calm, it can help us to be grounded. And when we feel like that, we are naturally more attractive to other people in terms of that we attract people to us to be able to help them out with problems or find solutions for things. It also helps us to communicate better as well. Now, at heart, we're all communicating or marketing our ideas all the time. Now, for me, on a Saturday morning, my whole communication effort goes into trying to get my 10-year-old daughter to tidy her room, which isn't always an easy task, I have to say. And I had another instance the other day, actually. I had this house maintenance company. They knocked on my door and asked if I wanted my guttering clean. Now, as it happened, I did. I had something like a little plant growing in the top guttering, and I was going to speak to a neighbour of mine who has done it in the past. And, you know, he said to me, he quoted me a price, and I thought, you know, I'm not happy with that. I'll get my neighbour to do it. So eventually I managed to convince him to come down to my idea of what I was happy to pay. After all, I hadn't invited him to knock on the door. He was in the area and he wanted my business. So he said I drove a hard bargain, and I laughed. But I'd marketed him the idea or communicated him the idea of utilising his time while he was there and not charging as much. So from his initial price of £60 that he wanted, I actually talked him down to 25. So being creative helps us as well, not only be able to communicate to others, but it helps us to understand our customers better and how we build those relationships with them and how we can get our product or service to make them feel better, how we can add value to their lives, because that's what being, you know, wanting to sell products to, or being creative or wanting to affect the change in someone else's life. And it can also help us to look at difficult situations in a different way. And finally, creativity can help us to understand ourselves and what we want from life. I mean, that's just a massive promise, isn't it, of what creativity can bring into our lives. Now, the one thing that I get asked a lot is it too late? Am I running out of time? to be creative? You know, is there a time limit in all this? And the answer is no, there isn't. Do you know what? It really, really, really doesn't matter whether you're 17 or 70. Today is an absolutely great time to rediscover your creativity. But I tell you this, it is a 24/7 process. And like anything in life, you get out of it what you put into it. And you may find that some of your creativity, you'll be paid for it, and some of it you won't. But do you know what? That really doesn't matter, because when you create for the joy of it, opportunities will just open up for you. And you still, even after all that, you still may wonder, why are we going to bother to be creative? You know, and if everything I said hasn't convinced you so far, well, I'll tell you why. Because most of us are secret dreamers. In our hearts, we yearn for lives that are kind of sweeter and juicier and more tender than the lives we have. And it's sadly one of the unspoken rules of the business world that we keep our dreams secret. And why should we do that? You know, why should, if you can do anything, what would you do? And why should that be secret? Shouldn't that be a main part of our life's journey? Shouldn't that be part of who and what we are? And creativity, like life, really isn't a linear journey. And we can often think about creativity. Now, this is a really great quote, and I like this from Julia Cameron. She says, we often think of creativity as all about action, about speaking up, all about being assertive and putting ourselves forward. But in her eyes, more accurately, creativity is about receptivity and listening. So it's about listening to others, listening to ourselves. So all of that takes us to our 3-week journey, and this is quite exciting. So over the 3 weeks, what are we going to have? So with week 1, today we're having a look at what's our story at the moment. Where are we? What's happened in our lives and to brings us to this point? And then in week 2, we're going to go ahead and look at, well, when you think of really successful leaders, and they're great believers about what they can do, they have gut instincts, they follow their intuition on things. But then when you get down to the middle management layers, I don't know if anybody else has found this, but they start to look at things in different ways. They stifle that creativity. But in week 2, we're going to be having a look at making the impossible possible in the way we think. And then in week 3, we're going to be looking at our future. What do you want going forward? And we're going to take advantage of all the changes that have happened from the new techniques that you're going to be learning over the 3 weeks. So this week, so this is where we are. And this week we are looking at our story. And it's all about discovering our authentic selves and, you know, finding out who we are. And I don't know about you, but sometimes life can feel like a lazy river. You know, it can be nice and it can just feel easy and things can just happen without effort, and it's wonderful. But then do you ever get times when it actually feels like this? You know, a bit of a roller coaster ride, and you just say, stop, I want to get off. You know, if you feel like that, stick it in the chat box, because it's nice to know that other people feel like that as well. You know, you're not the only ones that have that up and down, that big roller coaster. But we have, today, we have lots of things to contend with. And one of them is information overload. Do you know what? I mean, they've researched that we have at least 2 billion bits of data bombarding us every day. And you know, I don't know about you, but my mind can just feel overflowing. It just feels cluttered. Have you ever heard yourself say, like, you know, I just can't hear myself think? It's because of that continual noise and bombardment of sensory information that we have. And when you couple that with conforming to what other people want you to be, like that happens in a workplace, you know, you have that veneer of being a professional, of being seen in a certain way and doing certain things in a certain way. We can just end up morphing into something that isn't really us, something that's not us in our core. You know, I've had that experience. If you have as well, that would be great to share that, you know, stick it in the chat. And I literally woke up one morning in my 30s after a long while of feeling, all I can say was like treading through treacle of life. And I was frustrated in a corporate job. I was an accountant at the time and I just wasn't enjoying it. But I had to be there to pay the bills. And I just reached this point where I wondered who on earth I was. I didn't feel like I knew who I was anymore. Life just felt crappy. That's the best word to describe it. It just felt crappy. So if anybody else, do you feel like that? When I look back over my life, what have I learned so far? Well, I've been an actor, I've written books, I've been a chartered management accountant, I've been a qualified business analyst, but I knew in my heart that I wanted more. None of these things really, really floated my boat. And I knew creativity was a strong thread in my life. So I did an enormous amount of research and I discovered a lot about creativity, and a bit of which I'm sharing with you over these 3 weeks. And there is just so much more to go through, but you just can't cram it all into 3 weeks. So after putting all that information I gathered together, I took this really deep breath and I rediscovered myself, and I set up my own business. So you may wonder why, if we're wanting to rediscover our creativity, why we're looking at the crappy stuff today. Well, that's a good question. Because we have to see the dirt in order to clean the house. In other words, we need to know where we are in order to be able to move forward. It's like getting a GPS positioning on ourselves. And Louise Hay took stock of her life and what she wanted from it in her 60s. And she started Hay House Publishers. Now, I don't know whether you've ever heard of them or not, but they are a hugely successful worldwide publishing house. And she's now in her 80s and still very much involved. So, things like that just make you think that it's never too late, is it? And I just have that philosophy that you don't want to look back one day and regret not giving yourself the opportunity to do something or be yourself or find who you really want to be. So I'm going to give you this challenge. Sweep away your cobwebs. Let's take a deep breath and start the journey of moving towards us being more creative. So the first exercise that I've got is I call it either my daily muse or my daily dump, whatever you want. And I love those terms, and I'll explain why in a second. But this is a really, really simple exercise, but please, please don't take it lightly. It's really, really important in terms of rediscovering who you are. So get yourself a notebook. Doesn't matter whether it's a nice fancy one or whether it's a cheap one. Now, I like notebooks for doing this that are really cheap, like £1 or something, because then I don't mind scribbling in them. And if I've got a really good notebook, and I really do like stationery, and I only tend to want to write the good stuff in it. I like it to look nice. I want my handwriting to be nice. And I don't know what that says about me, but that's why I buy a cheap one, because I really don't mind what I put in it. So get something that feels right for you, and this will become part of your new routine going forward. Because what we all have is that inner chatter going on. Do you get that as well? Because, you feel sometimes like you're stuck between those two megaphones. You've got one voice in one ear and another one coming in, and whatever you want to call them, this writing down, whether it's your daily muse, if I'm feeling good, if I'm feeling a bit grumpy, I call it my daily dump, because I want to dump my rubbish, dump my frustrations, dump my issues down on a piece of paper. And just calling it a daily dump always makes me smile. It just makes me chuckle. So all of us have these multiple inner chatter voices, and we have different sorts. Now, you could have one that's a critic. You could have one that's a bit of an explorer. You could have a wanderer. I wonder what would happen if I did this or if I did that. You could have a pragmatist that's very practical and focused on reaching a goal. Or you could have a Pollyanna. Now, I like my Pollyanna. It comes up now and again, and it's really nice. Everything's great. You're really excited about stuff. You can make big changes. You're really capable. You're fantastic. Oh, I like them. And then you could have your inner romantic, or you can have your anxious side. You might have others as well. We're all slightly different. And, if you feel really silly and you want to write them down, do you know what? You can give them a name. You can call them like Anxious Alex. So when I write something down and I'm feeling a bit anxious about something, I can recognize, because it's going from my thoughts down onto paper, I can recognize that I'm worrying unnecessarily. And I can think, my Anxious Alex is on form today. And it's really interesting what comes forth in your writing. And the thing is, it's not to read or amend anything in your writing as you go. Don't worry about grammar, just write as fast as you can and just keep that pen moving. Anything that goes into your head, down on the paper. Now, it doesn't matter what it is, no one else is ever going to read it. But it's all the clutter, all the nonsense, all the times you give yourself a right royal telling off will come out on the page. And if you're like me, do you ever tell yourself off? Because just say if you do, because I do. I mean, there's sometimes my inner critic is just on absolute form, you know. Now, I run a couple of worldwide mastermind groups for entrepreneurs, and sometimes people have fantastic success early on, which is just amazing. You know, you get really excited and pleased for people. But there was this one really, really nice guy he was an amazing guy. And he set up his first webinar and he just absolutely blew people away. And sometimes when you see other people getting the success that you would like, it can make you reflect on things yourself and your own performance. And because of all of that, it made me reflect on me and what I felt that I wasn't doing very well. And I gave myself a really hard time about not creating the results that he had, which was stupid because we worked in different fields. He paid to advertise everywhere, and I never paid to advertise. I just find mine from word of mouth. But in my daily news that morning, or daily dump, my inner critic was like top form. You know, it was telling me that I couldn't do it, that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't know enough, that I was a fraud, that I was waiting to be found out. I mean, whew, blimey. I mean, I wouldn't speak to my worst enemy like that. So why should I speak to myself like that? And the physical act of writing all this stuff down just really helps you to realize the hard time you're giving yourself. But don't think that all the stuff that you write down is negative, because it certainly isn't at all. You can really sing your praises too. You can give yourself a pat on the back for things that have gone well. And why not even write yourself a letter from your inner mentor? So if you've got a problem or a situation, you know, what would they tell you to do? Another thing when you start writing that might come forth are your memories of old goals, things that you'd been dreaming about, things that you'd given up on but wish you hadn't. And I even find that I get little bits of inspiration. It's a bit like, because I'm so focused on writing, I'm not thinking of other things. I suddenly get ideas and oh, actually, that would make a really good podcast, or wow, that would make a really good blog. And, you know, that's great. It's a lovely way for finding inspiration for doing things. So this really is the power of the daily muse, the daily dump, the daily pages, whatever you want to call it. So I absolutely urge you to do it. So let's go back to the slides again. So we're back on the inner voices. So please, please make a contract with yourself. Declare to yourself that from today, you're going to rediscover your creativity and your authenticity. So here's the deal. Write 3 pages of A4 or 6 sides of A5 a day. Early morning is great, but don't beat yourself up if you don't get to do it until lunchtime or early evening, as long as you can do it every day. And the power of the mornings is that it can set you up for the day. So if you can do it in the morning, that's fantastic. But really, it all comes down to only you can rediscover your creativity. No one else can do it for you. But this group here for the next couple of weeks as well is here to support. And as I said, this is a 24/7 job, but one which you will start to love and appreciate as you go along the journey. You might even want to start fighting against this writing at first. And you know, that's pretty normal. We might sort of argue with ourselves that we don't have the time, that we don't want to get up earlier to do it. You know, there can be 1,001 different reasons why you shouldn't do it. And even your brain, your mind might try to argue against it, that it likes you the way it is. Why should you try to be more creative and resurrect goals which you couldn't achieve then? And why can you achieve them now? And the people around you might feel the same as well. They might like the current you, not the real you. But when people love you, they will let you grow. So just be true to yourself. So this is where we want the next bit then, is about looking at our mythology of creativity. Where are we so far in the journey? So grab your pen and paper. We've got a set of questions. This is about writing answers down. The first thing that comes into your mind is usually pretty good. So mine might be want to look at these things? Well, it gives us an honest view of where we are and where we've come from. So the first question is what does my father thought I was? My father thought I was, is that creative, clever, good, loving, beautiful, whatever? I don't want to put words and thoughts into your mind, but just write down the first thing that comes in. And the good thing about doing all these is they help us to examine the mythology and our backstory and our culture about using our creative gifts and whether any of this sort of thing is holding us back. Okay, next question. My mother thought I was. So same sort of things, beautiful, talented, clever, creative, logical. Anything else you can think of. Brilliant. So what were your three creative monsters? What held you back? What told you you couldn't be creative? Was it a particular teacher in school? Was it your parents? Was creativity frowned upon? Try and think of three things. If you can only come up with two, that's fine. Okay. And the next thing, who were the champions of your creativity? Who encouraged you on? Who wanted you enjoyed your creativity, thought what you did was great? It doesn't matter what type of creativity it was, there's all sorts. But who really stood behind you waving that flag and saying, yay, you're fantastic at being creative? Could have been a teacher, could have been a friend, could have been your mum, your grandparents. Okay, so these should just be the first three things that stick into your mind. Just give you a second more just to put those down. Okay, question 5. What were the lives that you yearned for as a youngster? What did you really want to do? What was in your heart? And I know we change our minds when we're growing up. One minute we might want to be a vet, the next minute we might want to be, I don't know, a hairdresser, or I don't know, there was once upon a time when boys wanted to be train drivers. What did you really dream to be when you were younger? Maybe you're doing it. Maybe you're really, really fortunate, and that's fantastic if you are. But if you're not, what would you have liked to have done? It can be 1, 2, 3 things. Fabulous. Try not to go through these too fast for you. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Now, if I'd had a perfect childhood, I would have grown up to be ... I don't know what a perfect childhood is. But if everything had gone through and you'd had the belief and the support and the confidence from your family around you, or you'd had the opportunity, what would you have liked to have done? Is it what you're doing now? Is it something different? Put it down. What would you really in your heart love to have done? These are quite difficult, aren't they? But that's great. It's very often our instinct, the first thing that comes to mind is the good thing that we really in our hearts want to be. Okay. Next question. My strengths as a child were... What were you good at? Were you great at gymnastics? Were you great at art? Did you love to read? Did you love to write? Were you expressive with numbers? Were you, what did you love to do? What did you find you had a natural inclination to do, naturally gifted at? Or, was it sports? Did you like to play golf? You can write down 1, 2, 3 things, whatever you like, whatever springs to mind, just jot it down on a bit of paper. Okay. So these are a bit challenging now. So in your opinion and from where you are, what's your opinion and what do you think about creatives? So creatives are they, some people might say they're shirkers, some people might say that they're clever and intelligent, some people might say they're introverted, some people might say they're extroverted. You might think that they're poor, you could think that they're rich, you could think that they're living the life that you'd like to live, or whatever. What springs to mind? What are creatives for you? Okay, and I'm going to ask you the same question again. What are creatives for you? What do you spring to mind? And it's funny because all this is the cultural and personal backstory that we've got from our families and our culture that we live in. They might not necessarily be our beliefs, or they are our beliefs, but they may be being imposed upon us. They could be, all sorts of restrictions and holding us, reasons that we hold ourselves back from being more creative because of something that maybe we've learnt when we've been younger. And I'll ask you the question again. Creatives are. What are creatives for you? Poor, rich, clever, not so clever, talented? Are creatives born? Or are they creative? Are people that are creative, are they made? Do they discover themselves? And if you have a fourth thing, put that down as well. This is the last one of these. So do you have anything else? Are they wealthy, happy? Maybe happiness is a big thing. You see creative people being happy and inspired. Okay, so these are the biggest questions. What does success look like for you? Success is it money? Is it prestige? Is it a job title? Is it a big house, a big car? What does that mean for you? And again, another one on success. Whatever comes into your head, write it down. Is it material stuff? Is it a way of life? Is it a way of living? Is it having a good family balance? And again, we've got another one of these again in a second. So this is really exploring us. And when you start to put all these things down, you can start feeling internally free of things. And the last one, success is. And this gives us a good representation of who we are and where we're feeling and how we've come to feel as we're feeling about creativity. Because if you want to change and you want to be something different, then Einstein's quote is fantastic, because insanity is keep doing what we keep doing and expecting a different result from that. So if we want something different in our lives, it means that we have to do something different within us. We have to think about the way we're thinking about things and be creative and change, and all these questions that we're doing at the moment in the writing helps us to flush our unconscious thinking out into the open so that we're more aware of it and we can do something about it. So just as a recap, our week's exercises: do your daily muse or your daily dump or your daily pages, your morning pages, whatever you want to call them, because all these exercises will help us get stronger. They'll help us to find who we are and strengthen our resolve and strengthen our goals and strengthen our creativity and our belief in ourselves. Listen to your inner chatter. Are you hard on yourself? Do you praise yourself enough? If you had an inner mentor, what would they tell you? How would they guide you to deal with things? How would they help you overcome obstacles and difficulties? And think about the answers to the questions that we went through just a minute ago. What does that say about your beliefs and where you are in your creative journey? And are they true beliefs to you? Are they things where you could look to change? It's useful having all these things out in the open. So at least when they're out in the open, we can kind of do something about it. So just wrapping up, For next week, what can we expect next time? Well, we're going to have a look at the fact that great leaders are great believers. We're going to have a quick check-in about your daily muse, see how that's going. I mean, it's still early days. This is a longer term journey, but you will start to notice that the daily muse is starting to make a difference. Timing for everybody is different. Some people find the journey really quick and other people will take a bit longer, but persevere, really, really worth it. So as I said, we're going to look at great believers are great leaders. You know, they haven't lost their sense of wonder, their gut feeling about things. And we're going to look at how you can reignite yours. Because if you have a great idea or have some inspiration to do something, then you have all the resources within you to make your dream a reality. Doesn't mean it's going to be an easy ride, but it does mean that creatively you can overcome any obstacles that you surmount. So we've got a fantastic exercise in that for next week, so we can look towards moving and finding your bliss and what you want in life. So really great big thank you for joining me today. It's wonderful to have so many people. It's brilliant. So we'll see you again at 12:30 next Friday. Enjoy your week. Don't forget your promise to yourself and your contract to do your writing. Enjoy discovering it because it's really great once you get into it. And I'll see you again next week at the same time. Take care and have a lovely week.